That would be great. Thank you.
Sure. Miss Albert,
Here.
Mr. Constant, Mr. Dunbar, Miss Kennedy,
Here.
Miss
Here.
LaFrance, Mr. Perez Verdia,
Here.
Mr. Peterson,
Present.
Miss Quinn Davidson,
Here.
Mr. Rivera,
Present.
Mr. Weddleton, and Miss Salatel.
Present. And Mr. Constant will be joining us in a few minutes. I'll try to note when he.
Meg, you're muted.
Great, thank you. So Mr. Constant will be joining us in a few minutes. We'll try to note when he comes on the line. And so the agenda for today is we'll start with audience participation, those who've signed up. We have a full slate. And then we will jump into the 3 items on the agenda. So for audience participation, those individuals have 3 minutes to speak. Please remember to keep your comments directed toward the chair, and that no personal attacks will be tolerated, and that if you speak here at the beginning, that if we have time for audience participation at the end, you will not get another opportunity to speak. And with that, we will start with Mr. Oliva. Ron, you can go ahead if you're ready.
Mr. Oliva might need to push *6.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
You are there, Mr. Oliva. Please begin.
Okay, well, my name is Ron Oliva. I own the property adjacent to the Brother Francis shelter. They did a $50,000 study, Agnew Beck, which was on the agenda to recommend a purchase. Because of the pandemic, it was either canceled, that meeting, or postponed on the agenda. I'd like to know what happened to that, as the letter of intent signed by the Muni and myself has since expired without my knowledge. Second thing I'd like to do is demand the closure of Brother Francis shelter for non-compliance of their conditional use, and also calling for federal investigation for elder abuse. Some of the respite clients there are on a 30% grade. Recently, a woman with no legs in a wheelchair wheeled herself up, and because they didn't comply with picking up the garbage, a bear showed up, and I consider this reckless endangerment to their clients. Also, under protest is the sidewalk that starts construction on the south side of 3rd Avenue, which is from Ingress Street down to Post Road. The Brother Francis shelter has never resolved the crosswalks. There are no crosswalks from Reeve Boulevard all the way up to Cordova, including straight through traffic flow on a truck route. This is a death trap. It's been opposed by the Alaska Truckers Association, has been opposed by Chris Constant at the Fairview Community Council, and the obtuse attitude of the engineer, along with the shelter and Beans not protesting this, is disgraceful. This is a death trap. Those people are going to wander out into that truck route. The truckers are not going to be able to swerve. And if you want to end homelessness, try not to do it by making these people street pizzas. The other thing is, I don't want, along with the neighborhood, Beans to return to full operation in that heavy industrial area on the truck road. And I would demand that code enforcement and appropriate agencies follow through with their investigation to the violations of these agencies that you call partners to put these people and the entire neighborhood at risk. So, Brother Francis, I'd like them to close. Beans, I would like them not to return. And hey, we will have a better neighborhood and protect the homeless better if they find a more safe and secure location. Do you have any questions?
I'll give it a second, Mr. Leva. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm not seeing any right now, Mr. Leva. Thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Todd Held. Mr. Held, are you on the line?
I am.
Okay. Your 3 minutes is ready to start. Please begin.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. I'll keep my comments brief and hopefully to the point. My name is Todd Held. I am an associate real estate broker, and I'm also a lifelong Anchorage resident, one of those who are actually from here. I've watched Anchorage grow as I grew with it. I've watched Anchorage go from a small city with small city problems to a larger city with big city problems and nicknames such as Los Anchorage. I have said goodbye to friends and clients who have said enough is enough. They almost always cite high crime, high property taxes, high cost of living, high this, high that, high the other as the reason they leave. Ironically, some of them still do work here. They just have a better quality of life elsewhere. In reading this proposed ordinance, it raises some questions as well as my hackles. I find it disturbing that we call the homeless campers in this ordinance. A quick look at the dictionary defines camping as the activity of spending a vacation living in a camp, tent, or camper. These people aren't on vacation. They either choose to live this way or they have no choice but to live this way. They are not on vacation. The ordinance seems to be based on the fact that the shelters at our arenas were put into effect due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Over and over, that seems to be the sole basis for it. One statement in the proposal states the current health protections required in response to COVID-19. The COVID-19 emergency highlighted Anchorage's gross deficiency in its ability to provide mass shelter. I have to wonder a few things just based on that statement. Why weren't we so worried about this when the temperature in January was 10 below zero? I also have to ask, when using the Sullivan and the Ben Boeke arenas, were they full? Did they actually reach capacity? Because I have heard conflicting statements about how they were utilized or underutilized. If there truly is a need for more space, why isn't the Muni looking at current existing municipal buildings? I'm willing to bet if a neutral or a disinterested third party took a look at the municipality's utilization of its real estate, they could find suitable space. It is noted that no private sector economic effects are expected, and I strongly disagree with this. Ask any business that has a homeless camp or a shelter nearby what their increased costs actually are. Security is now required to protect their assets and their patrons. And whether it's a business or a residence, the property values tend to be lower. However, their property taxes always seem to go up. My biggest complaint with this proposal is that it seeks to bypass the public hearing process. I suspect this is the plan so that the public remains uninformed. Title 21 took years to write, rewrite, and enact. If the public wanted anyone to have the ability to bypass, that would have been part of Title 21. There was a rumor that Mayor Berkowitz wants to use this newfound power to purchase the Golden Lion Hotel.
Wrap up. Your
This
time.
is just, I'm sorry?
Your time is up. Could you please wrap up the last sentence?
Buying the Golden Lion is bad because of public safety. With approximately 75,000 cars a day passing by, the increased foot traffic spells a recipe for disaster. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, next up, and the last we have for beginning audience participation is Nick Begich, but I want to note for the record, we've been joined by Ms. LaFrance and Mr. Constant. Go ahead, Mr. Begich. You have 3 minutes. Are you there, Mr. Begich? Okay, I am not hearing from him, so I will put him at the first if we get to the next section, and we've also been joined by Mr. Dunbar. All right, so let's move on to the first item under business, and that's the presentation by Holly Cannon. And Holly, if you'd like to go ahead and get started, I'll share my screen with the document.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Meg. So good morning, everyone. My name is Holly Cannon, and I was formerly homeless here in Anchorage. And we appreciate you inviting the HRAC to share its perspectives on the municipality's programs of camp outreach and camp abatement. We appreciate the efforts to protect the houseless individuals and the families from the ravages of COVID-19. With a little more effort, we believe the municipality can bring a similar degree of concern to the plight of our campers. We're submitting our testimony in writing. And a little bit about HRAC. Our Homeless Resource Advocacy Council, it's in a constant state of renewal and discovery. All of our voting members have or are currently houseless, and we strive to be a voice that is heard in the past for all those communities we serve. We strive to have a safe place for houseless people to unpack their trauma and share their joys concerning hopes and needs. We strive to be a bridge over the chasm separating the houseless and the housed. And we strive to be a forum for the houseless and formerly houseless individuals to meet housed individuals in the middle, where we can seek reconciliation and build a common understanding of the problem while working together towards the solutions to mend our tattered safety nets. We believe that intersectional conversations concerning our common and shared feelings of alienation may take us on a path toward reconciliation and healing of some of society's wounds. At HRAC, our camp outreach efforts. Members of HRAC were actively engaged with last year's Camp Occupy, where we witnessed grassroots democracy in action with daily talking circles, managing camp affairs, sharing deeply personal concerns, and policing member behaviors. We believe we have been reaching out to several camps over the course of this winter and spring, delivering food and clothing as we've been able to acquire it. Since COVID-19, we have continued to maintain contact with several camps, distributing masks and advice on how to stay healthy. Our visits to the 3rd Avenue camp were probably the most troublesome, but not unique. We would provide masks and encourage their use, but none would be seen on our next visit. We would tell the campers that the city was serious about cleaning the area and they should seek shelter elsewhere. Very few of the 3rd Avenue campers that we encountered were good candidates for the municipality shelters. Most of them have behavior or mental health problems that would not be acceptable in shelter environments. Many of them cannot tolerate being herded into corrals or communal shelter life. Most of them are not ready to enter programs that might help them manage their problems. We are certain that camp abatement teams will encounter many of these campers over and over again as they are forced to move time and time again across Anchorage. Connecting houseless individuals with services tailored to their individual needs so they can secure housing is a crucial first step from camp to home. Some of us, like my husband and I, are no longer houseless because of compassionate outreach was the first step in our journey to recovery and becoming established members of the community at large. We appreciate the fact that the COVID-19 response plans include a robust outreach and referral component. More than 400 houseless folks have been housed during the COVID-19 response initiative, and that's great news, though we do not know of one that was not in a shelter. But the COVID-19 outreach effort is to serve campers has been nearly non-existent. MIT redirected its priorities in January and has not been providing outreach. Efforts to get the agency involved were pretty much unsuccessful. We are told that delays relate to the liability associated with exposing employees to COVID-19. We know of only one outreach worker in the field during the first week of June, while well-staffed abatement efforts were still taking place all around him. We are pleased that the municipality issued a request for grant proposals for the Outreach Referral Specialist Services pilot program from July 1st to December 31st. Hopefully the work performed under this $183,000 grant will lead to a robust program that will continue for as long as we have campers. ATRAC would like the opportunity to collaborate with the agency that receives the grant, and we hope that there will be an opportunity to do so. The deadline on June 11th for submitting the outreach grant proposal fell after camp abatement was nearly complete along Chester Creek, Campbell Creek Park, and Mountain View Lions Park. It's almost like relocating underground utilities a week after the street was paved, but we're talking about people, not utilities. As far as camps, we understand the neighborhoods do not want campers adjacent to their property. We know that campers cannot expect to be welcome on private property. We know that there will always be campers who can't deal with communal shelter living. We believe strongly that the municipality must provide a safe space on public property for sanctioned camping and tiny homes. We recommend that you do so as soon as possible before Anchorage's newly evicted houseless folks join on the streets. And there's 2 links to Kings County where they have successfully done sanctioned camping and tiny home villages. With camp abatement, we understand the political necessary for camp abatement, but it's wrong to justify camp abatement on the basis of availability of shelter beds when the shelters are not prepared to accommodate campers with untreated mental and behavioral health issues. We strongly oppose the execution of camp abatement orders and the absence of effective outreach and referral services. It's wrong to force campers out of camps when there's no alternatives exist that can meet their immediate needs, and then force them to move repeatedly over the course of the year after year after year. This treatment of campers mirrors a desire in our society to just have the houseless disappear. We acknowledge that the municipality has devoted a lot of resources to the COVID-19 emergency shelter programs, but this does not excuse the fact that the municipality is not in compliance with federal Center for Disease and Control specific COVID-19, recommending that camps be left in place and COVID-19 social distancing and personal hygiene practices be implemented and enforced in those camps. With the alcohol tax revenue, we understand that the Assembly will be besieged with high priority projects backed by vocal constituents. ATRAC's constituents are neither well-connected nor property owners nor formally organized, but their voices need to be heard, and we appreciate your invitation to speak on behalf. On behalf of all the Anchorage houseless families, individuals, we urge you to preserve a significant portion of this new source of revenue to strengthen and redesign services such as a 72-hour detox center and rehabilitation services, social, behavior, mental health, and job skills training, as well as low-impact options to camp abatement. These financially starved services are critical components in our collaborative efforts to make the houseless being a brief, one-time thing. In conclusion, we urge you to suspend camp abatements until your outreach and referral program is fully operational. We urge you to provide for supervised camping and tiny home and devote a significant portion of the alcohol tax to fund desperately needed human services. And thank you for letting us voice our concerns and the concerns of those we serve.
Thank you, Holly. Let me see if there are any questions for you. And members, you can either text me or just put your desire to be in the queue in the chat. And we did have the document. Yes, the document will share. Thank you for that, folks. It was shared with all members previously, but we'll go ahead and put it back up and we can post it on the committee page as well. And this is Holly Cannon, who is testifying. Are there any other questions for Holly as a representative from ATRAC? Okay, I'm not seeing any, Holly. Thank you for taking the time and for this work to present with us and to put together this paper. I appreciate all of this work and look forward to continuing our conversation.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mike, for the opportunity.
Yep. All right, next we're going to move on to discussion. Presentation of shelter zoning ordinance, and I believe we have Michelle McNulty with us today.
Hi, Meg and everyone. Yep, this is Michelle McNulty. So there has been an ordinance that's been put forward, as it states in the AO and in the AM. Currently under Title 21, the only zoning designation that allows homeless shelters is the Public Lands and Institution PLI district. Homeless and transient shelters are allowed in that district through the conditional use permit process. And evaluating a lot of other communities across the country, as well as even in Alaska, we are one of the few communities that limits that use to one zoning designation. And it's created a problem, as we all know, in finding other facilities that could house homeless individuals or transient individuals. So the ordinance would simply update the use table to allow homeless and transient shelters in the B3 General Business Zoning District, subject to approval of a conditional use permit. I'm not sure how, yeah, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, that's fantastic. Yeah, please, if there are any questions, again, in the chat, or you can text to get in the queue. I do have one question. Can you talk about what the current zoning is for allowing a treatment center, like an alcohol and drug treatment center, and if this ordinance will have any effect on that?
Currently, any type of substance abuse or treatment center would be allowed. They're considered typically a habilitative care or a medical office. Both of those uses are already allowed in the B3 zoning district, so this ordinance will have no effect on any of those uses.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton.
Oh, thanks. A couple of questions. Michelle, could you briefly go through what is the process for conditional use? So this B3 change, and then what would happen? So looking for a new homeless or transient shelter, is there a site selection study? And then once that's done, what's the process for conditional use and how long would it take?
Under site selection study, it is waived if there's a requirement for a conditional use permit. So that would not be a requirement unless someone chose to do that just to map out where they would want to select facilities. But the conditional use permit process in itself is the applicant is required to, prior to even submitting an application to the planning department, they are required to meet with the affected community councils. So wherever that facility is located in that community council, they are to notify all individuals and homeowners and renters within 500 of the property that there is going to be an action item at the community council. And then they hold the community council meeting. They have a pre-application meeting with the planning department where we invite all the applicable departments and or agencies to provide feedback to the applicant. Then the applicant submits an application. All applications submittal, and that time route the application of community affected community and we open through web or via we find out another area, let's say, and location of typically have a so that to the testify.
Michelle, you go ahead.
Process. That
confusion. To Title 21 would go line and zone, then and in this zoning commission in the zoning that place chosen.
a little bit, possibly Jason Bakken said he's on the phone on that decision, but primarily I think this to bypass planning. See a COVID emergency provide to find other shelters. Seeing is that when there's is no back and individuals that are housed in the temporary shelters will have to find a new location. And typically planning and zoning does not, other than the conditional use permits, they're not as involved with the homeless problem as the assembly is. But again, I would like to ask Jason or Robin Ward if she's on the phone to add to that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, this is Jason Bockenstedt, and I think Michelle did a good job, but Mr. Weddleton, I think you also kind of hit the nail on the head. Is part of what we're asking for with this ordinance is a blanket in B3 zones. These are allowed instead of typically we were doing one-off requests of the Planning and Zoning Commission that are, as you said, are only advisory to the assembly. So we're essentially saying, hey, the administration, the assembly, we want to have a debate about this. We want to have a conversation, but ultimately the decision rests with the assembly to make this formal change. So, that is what we're asking. Very well laid out.
I actually have in an
Just some of those
use process. So that the Assembly wouldn't have a role in approving the conditional use districts. That's the zoning commission, and then if it's appealed, it goes on appeal to at what I guess point in the process would the Assembly have opportunity for?
Should I, this is Michelle, should I answer that question?
Yes, please.
Please.
Okay. I figured, so that's correct. So the assemblies would not, after this ordinance is approved, if it's approved, the assembly would not weigh in on the process from that point moving forward. So all decisions at that point would be through the public hearing process and approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And they act as quasi-judicial in that manner and have the final approval. So really the assembly's opportunity to participate in the conversation is now as they're reviewing the AO.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Kennedy, please.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I just had my question answered because my question was in regard to the zoning for that. Everything. Those kind of conversations that are so delicate and controversial, I think would really be dangerous. So I'm really apt to oppose this. But anyway, I guess my question then would be, why wouldn't it be better for the assembly to simply handle variances, look at exceptions for shelters and handle them on an individual basis rather than just having a blanket anything goes now in any of the B3 districts? But if anybody wants to comment, that's great. But I think I pretty much already got my answer just from what Michelle McNulty was just saying. So thank you.
Did anybody wish to?
This is Mr. Constant. I do, but I'll wait. I'm in the queue.
Okay. Yeah, we've got Mr. Weddleton first, please. Thank you.
I think you're muted, John.
Okay, I think another point. If I think this assembly would, in this process as it's defined now, be out of the loop, but that's something that we may consider. I think we can put rails on a conditional use through this ordinance. But also, if the city were involved with doing a shelter, there would be the site selection study, and also which assembly could be involved with, and also approval of the funds to buy a building or whatever money would be spent. So we wouldn't be out of the loop if the city were closely involved. Is that correct, Michelle?
So it is, but in order to ensure that there's a site, so under site selection study criteria applicability, there's an exception if a conditional use permit is involved. So if we wanted to make that a requirement, we would also want to introduce a change to the site selection approval or site selection study applicability, saying that homeless or transient shelter shall always